Hi, so I'm going to talk about how sometimes I argue and just what I regret and why I typically do it and whatever. I'll ramble about it for a little bit. Um so I often find that it's really tempting to just argue with people, especially when it's online. Um like just I think that arguing is a way like or when I do it intentionally, it's because I want to express my introverted thinking, which is really difficult to express outwardly, I think, because it's so it's introverted, everything's interconnected, and one of the best ways to test the system of logic I've thought of is to argue with someone, I think. Like, I don't know, if I'm hmm, I don't know where I was going after that. So just it's a lot easier to explain your side of things if someone else says something first, I want to say. Like, if I had to explain something to someone and I'm imagining myself doing so, I normally don't, like, think about it in a way where it's like I'm the teacher and I'm just explaining it to them, in, a regular format. Like, it's mostly like they say something that's wrong, and I'll explain to them how that's wrong. And it's just a way to get all of the little bits of information, like pick and choose what I'm about to explain to them instead of trying to explain the whole like system that I've thought of to them, because it's all interconnected and so difficult to just take one little piece and decide, okay, this is what I'm going to teach this person. Instead, it's like, oh, this person is wrong on this portion, so I'll explain this portion to them. And so, yeah, that's how I think that's part of the reason why I like to argue, is just expressing introverted thinking when it's so difficult to express normally. But there's a lot of downsides to it. Like, actually, I'll get to the downsides later. Um, I like to argue with people. Like, I'm not gonna go out of my way normally unless I'm really stressed to argue with someone in person, like someone who I know, especially. Like, just because then I have to deal with their emotions on the topic, and I don't really like that. It makes me feel awkward, and if I get frustrated with them, like, if there's someone who, no matter what I say, they're not gonna listen to it, and when it's in person, it's because it's more personal. Like, if someone's rejecting information for the sake of maintaining like what they think is right, even though it's not logically consistent and it's not going to work, and like if someone's doing that, I get kind of frustrated with them if I've explained to them how they're wrong and they still continue to go wrong. Like, especially if I have to deal with them, their I don't know how to say, their wrongness, like every time or several times again afterwards, it gets kind of frustrating. So, like, one of my ex, we we actually started dating because we liked arguing with each other. But I think he was more feeling oriented than I was, and like sometimes there were topics where he was just set on what like he thought was right, like no matter what anyone said. And at first I didn't realize that he was so stubborn about it, and I would try to explain to him over and over again, like, no, that doesn't really work because this and that, and no, it's not really that way because you're ignoring this portion, and they just wouldn't listen to what I had to say. And, like, sometimes we would just leave it, and I wouldn't argue with them for a while, and I'd just be like, okay, so we disagree, but then they would, like, share something on Facebook that, like, was political, and it had to do with what I just explained to them. Like, I don't care about what people call themselves politically. I used to, but I'm older now and I don't care. But if their information is wrong, I get frustrated with that, especially if they know it's wrong. And like what he shared would often like highlight exactly what I told him was incorrect because of this or that and whatever. And I would start the argument back up again and start explaining that exact same thing to him again, slightly differently normally, and typically each time I would have a little bit more to add, and I just got increasingly frustrated with him, and eventually I just broke up with them for other reasons too, but mostly that, because I just got so frustrated with seeing the same dumb thing over and over again. So, I don't know, I don't remember where I started with this, oh no. Give me a second. Yeah, so in person, I argue for slightly different reasons. It's less enjoyable because of like both emotions and just having to see the same wrong thing over and over again um, by the same person who, like, I take it kind of personal sometimes when people reject introverted thinking. Like, when people reject my logic, even though I can tell that it like works, and they reject it on the basis of feelings or whatever, um, then I get kind of frustrated with that eventually, especially if it's in person, because it's like I'm not very good at talking to people in person anyway. So once they like reject like my introverted thinking, which is like just it's what I do all the time as an INTP, um, then I feel kind of bad about it, and it points out to me that like, oh, there's not, yeah, people just don't understand me and blah blah blah, and I get kind of sad about it. Like social issues involving, like, I don't mean social political issues, I mean like just me and socializing in general tends to stress me out quite a bit because I know I'm bad at it, but I can't seem to fix it no matter how hard I try about it. Like, I'll get better, but right now it's really frustrating because I like afterwards I can see kind of what I did, but not really. So, like, I'm bad at friendships and I don't understand why I'm bad at it and like how I'm doing stuff wrong. Um, and so in person, if someone rejects like introverted thinking to me, especially if I know them, I get kind of upset about it and frustrated. Also, in person, I don't like the arguments because I do have to deal with their emotions, and sometimes their emotions rub off on me a little bit. Like, if someone gets angry and yells at me, like, I can go from being really calm and just, kind of, just arguing slightly to suddenly I'm either leaving because I can't handle someone be yelling at me, or if I know them really well, like if it's my mom and she yells at me, I will yell back at her because I know her and she's, and so it's just it never ends well once people start yelling and like I don't know. Also, sometimes in the middle of especially personal arguments that aren't like about outside things, like stuff that I'm gonna have to deal with every day, um like fairness, like especially in my house, like if my sister keeps doing something and it's like annoying and she shouldn't do that because I don't do that to her or something like that, or I'm like I put in the effort to make sure that doesn't happen to her, I will get upset about it because it like has to do with like this issue of fairness and just what you should do, because it's it makes things a little bit unbalanced, and it's like, why should I even bother doing this for you anymore if you're not doing that for me? And I'll get frustrated with that sort of thing, um, and start arguments with people, and then that's really when my introverted logic, like, it's kind of mixed with feelings at that point. Like, if someone continues like to reject it, things will escalate really quickly in that case, because it's like, well, that's not fair, you shouldn't do that, it doesn't make sense to do that, and blah blah blah. And I will get frustrated because I know I'm gonna have to deal with this again, and like I don't want to just leave it the way it is because I don't want this to keep happening. Like, if that makes any sense, I don't want the situation to keep arising every single time and nothing being done about it. And to some extent, it has to do with like misunderstandings as well. Like, if you have two stressed out people, and it doesn't matter how smart they are, if they're stressed out, they aren't going to be 100%, and you'll have so many misunderstandings. Like, people will misinterpret each other when they're stressed all the time, I've noticed. And like, especially me, if I get stressed out enough and I want to argue for emotional reasons instead of like thinking reasons, and like, because for the INTP stress loop, you go and you have a lot of introverted thinking followed by like too much introverted thinking followed by too much like extroverted feeling, which is mostly subconscious at that point. So I'll have an emotional outburst and I'll like be saying all these things, and later because it's an emotional topic, I won't like what I have to say because I couldn't explain it very well, or like I was just wrong and I didn't realize it at the time. If it's not emotional, I'm typically not all too far off. Like, I might be wrong, but only because I missed out on like certain bits of information that I didn't know existed. But if it's emotional, I'm probably wrong, I've realized. And so as long as I'm not arguing about emotional things, I'm typically good. As long as no one argues, like yells at me while they're arguing too. And as long as they don't continuously reject my introverted thinking, I'm also good. Now, I like arguing with people online, though, quite a bit. And I think it's because it's less personal this way. Like, I don't have to deal with the way they feel, and that kind of rhymed. And just, I won't ever see them again. Like, there's so many people online, I'm probably never going to argue with the same person twice. And, like, I won't regret arguing with people online, typically, unless I know them. Like, yeah. But in person, I will typically regret arguing with them, or if I'm arguing with someone who I'm gonna, like, if I argue on Facebook, I will regret it a little bit, because it's socially inappropriate to just argue with someone. Like, you should act a little bit more civilized, or something like that, or, like, don't point out that someone's wrong, I guess. Like, people don't always point out when other people are wrong, and I find that a little bit silly, but they don't, because it's like, I don't know, maybe it's impolite to tell someone that they're wrong about something, or something like that. But yeah, I'll regret it afterwards, but only because of feelings. Like, I regret it for emotional and social reasons. Like, it's socially inappropriate, therefore I regret doing that. But I don't regret my arguments typically, unless they're also emotional. Like, if that makes sense. I'll feel pretty strongly about what I said, and I can see where it like was socially inappropriate for me to argue in the first place, but my arguments themselves were good, like solid. Well, not entirely solid, no arguments are that good, but like they weren't terrible, and I still think I'm right, but like I shouldn't have argued with them. Yeah. Anyway, so I guess oh, last thing. I guess my entire point is it's a bit of a trap to argue with people. Especially if you see them again, it's very tempting to just suddenly disregard social rules and just for the sake of expressing your introverted thinking, but I don't recommend you do it. And I think you should find healthier ways, and this goes for me too, to express introverted thinking if you can. Because arguments can go bad very quickly, and I don't know, I guess it's a little bit too negative. Like, if I'm arguing with someone who I actually find is worth talking to, it doesn't feel like an argument at that point. Like, unless I'm arguing with someone who's like just tunnel vision, they will not consider anything outside of their own personal feelings or what they just felt was, that's the same thing. Like, they won't consider what I have to say. It feels very much like an argument, and there's a lot of tension. But if it's with someone who actually seems to, you know, consider other points of view and whatnot, it doesn't, like, I can't think of a time where that felt like an argument, you know. So I'll leave at that, I guess.